Intuition, noun, the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. A thing that one knows and considers likely from instinctive feeling rather than conscious reasoning. Welcome to Grounding Journey. I'm Chris Greer. As a 40-something mom, business owner, yoga lover, and long-time spiritual seeker, I've been craving deeper conversations, the kind that arise from connections with other women who are on a similar journey. My purpose with Grounding Journey is to provide a space where we can have real, fulfilling, and sacred conversations. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Welcome to this week's episode, Intuition, Seeing with Your Soul. I'm excited to have my guest, Victoria Shaw, here to discuss the word intuition. I think this one's going to be really deep. So we're going to talk about intuition, from developing it to trusting it to being guided by it. And Victoria is a licensed professional counselor and spiritual coach who combines her background and training in psychology and counseling with her intuitive gifts to help clients heal, grow, and realize their spiritual and full personal potential. She especially loves working with people who are committed to using their struggles and life experiences to fuel their own spiritual awakening. Like, that's all of us. Victoria has also authored 4 self-help books. She hosts an Intuitive Connection podcast and is the mother of 2 spirited, now adult children. I love that you included your kids in your intro because that's where we get a lot of our experience, right?
Yes, ma'am. A huge part of my journey.
Oh my goodness, my son. Yes. But I'm glad you're here, Victoria. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So tell me a little bit more about you. Like, I've given the official bio, but tell us a little bit more about you. Who's Victoria?
Who's Victoria? I don't know. She changes every day. I'm someone who I think came to the world, like many of us did, to learn and to grow and to share the wisdom and guidance that I have experienced over what I believe is multiple lifetimes in physical form here with the world. And so I guess, that's the answer to the question that you asked. What do I do is a different question, or how am I realizing that greater mission right now? Again, I'm hosting a podcast, so I'm able to share every week with listeners whatever comes through for me in terms of guidance for them. And I work with a lot of people all over the world on, having their own kind of spiritual awakening in human form through awakening their intuition and through using the inner wisdom that I think we all have that society doesn't really teach us how to use in their lives, because for me, tapping into my intuition was a complete game changer in all aspects of my life.
So tell me about your journey to tapping into your intuition. I know my experience is different than everybody else's, and everybody has their own experience. So tell me a little bit about yours and how you came to really know that intuition needed to lead you.
Got it. So for me, I think I was a very intuitive child, and I think all children are intuitive for a while. And then as we move along life's path, we kind of lose touch with it. But for me, I can remember all throughout my childhood and even adolescence and early adulthood experiences now that I can look back and go, oh, that was my intuition. But I didn't know it was happening. I didn't know what it was. And for me too, I was so overwhelmed because my intuition was on 24/7 in a way that really wasn't helpful. Like every channel was blaring at once. And so sometimes really great bits of wisdom came through, but a lot of the time I was just confused and overwhelmed. So a big part of my journey was, first of all, recognizing sort of what was my intuition and why I should care about that. And then also sort of doing a lot of inner growth and healing work to kind of clear my channels so that I was tuning into just the information that was most beneficial to me and, more closely aligned with the wisdom of my soul. And for me, that journey started about 15 years ago in earnest, even though, like I said, I can look back now and know throughout my life, there were times when I was definitely tuned into my wisdom. But when it really started to become a thing to me was about 15 years ago when we made the move from New York City to Connecticut. And when I was living in New York, as a highly sensitive, empathic soul, I was just overwhelmed by the sheer volume of people and energies and everything going on. I was also the mom of two young kids and two young, wonderful, amazing human beings, but that were very challenging. They each had challenges. They were challenging to parent, and I was definitely an overwhelmed mama. And so in my journey to support my kids, I was fortunate to come across lots of sort of healers and helpers that were a little bit outside of the box. And so if you had asked me, say, in fact, somebody did ask me when I was pregnant with my daughter and I was looking at a certain labor and delivery method called the Bradley method, and I was interviewing people, and one of them said, "Oh, I'm an astrologer." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not going with you." And then fast forward a few years later, and it was a session with an astrologer that literally was the first step in changing my life. So I really went from a very left-brained, kind of had glimmerings of the intuition, but wasn't really comfortable with that whole woo-woo world, to gradually kind of following those breadcrumbs to working with more and more people who are tapped into that spiritual perspective and tapped into using their intuition. And they all kept telling me, "You got to awaken your intuition. You're very intuitive. You know stuff. You got to do this." And finally, I started to listen. And when we moved to Connecticut, outside of the city, and the pace of life settled down, and I started to deepen my meditation practice and really started to ask to connect to my intuition in earnest, that's when everything changed. And my whole life transformed. And it happened pretty fast.
I love that. Once you are connected, I was just having this conversation, not in a podcast call, but with my life coach. And she's like, when you tap in right now, things happen fast, and you manifest something and it's there 2 days later if it's for your highest good, for sure. So I wrote down a couple of notes while you were talking of things that I wanted to revisit. And I know that you have a fabulous course that's available on your website that helps people develop your intuition. So I'd love it if you can give us a few of those little nuggets. One of the things that you were talking about is recognizing your own intuition. How did you experience that? How did you start to recognize and realize that it was your intuition? Because I think a lot of people, I know for me, when I was younger, because I'm like you, when I look back now, I'm like, wow, that was my intuition when I was like 6. But for a long time, I just thought it was voices, in my head. And I have a very dear friend who is so intuitive, doesn't accept that she's so intuitive. And, she's like, "I'm losing my mind. I'm going on medication for it." And I'm like, no, that's not what's wrong. So let's talk about for a moment, for those people who are feeling like they're losing their mind. It's not, it's their intuition so ready to be awakened, not awoken, awakened.
Absolutely. And I actually have a whole episode on the podcast about the difference between mental illness and intuition, because I am, in fact, a counselor. And when this started happening for me, there were times when I was thinking, wow, here I am, I'm talking to spirit guides and, all this stuff that's a little bit out there. Maybe I'm losing it. And for me, the proof in the pudding was that life kept getting better. And people that knew me kept saying, "What are you doing? Do more of that." And I was happier. And the information that came through, it felt right. It didn't feel like, certainly no one was telling me to do anything crazy. It was really inspiring stuff. And so I really think the difference between someone who's hearing voices, and I hear my voices in my head. So for me, at least, it's not like someone in the outside world is talking to me, but some people really do have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guest on the podcast this morning who had that experience. So it can happen. But a lot of times it's not that striking. But regardless, for me, the way that it's your intuition is that it helps. It improves your life. It's life affirming. It's not fear-based. And I actually had the honor of participating in a study at Yale University where they're actually looking at people that hear voices in a way that's more unhelpful to them, mental illness, and people that hear it intuitively or psychically. And I've been in a couple phases of the study. And, as a subject, I don't exactly know what their premise is, but as a psychologist, I can kind of guess.
Right.
And I think what they're starting to, really uncover is that, your intuition, you're in control.
Mm-hmm.
You're in control. Whereas, when people are hearing voices that aren't helpful, it's like they feel like those voices are controlling them.
That's a great way
Um,
to say it.
yeah. And intuition, you're always in charge and you listen and you have free will and you have a choice. And usually that voice of your soul, which is what I believe intuition is, I believe intuition comes from our connection to our highest spiritual selves. I believe we are spirits first and humans second. So you're a spiritual being having a human experience, and your intuition is that direct line to your soul. And so when you think about it like that, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? It's just magical and beautiful. And we are all multi-sensory beings, whether we recognize it or not. And of course, the more we recognize it, the more those extrasensory experiences start happening for us, or those multi-sensory experiences start happening for us. And yes, there are people that have extrasensory experiences where they're picking up on stuff that's not super helpful. And you might call that psychic or intuitive as well. But really what I'm talking about when I talk about intuition is tuning into those higher energies and those higher calling, and really plugging into your highest spiritual wisdom. And that's where the magic starts to happen.
I love that, because it is all magic that it really starts to happen.
It
And,
sure is.
we're talking about intuition, hearing voices. And, I personally think the intuition the voices that I hear are sometimes my guides, really giving me guidance. Some people feel intuition in their body, in their
Right.
soul. So there's so many different ways to feel intuition that each person has to kind of really connect with themselves and learn what they're feeling, um,
Yes.
and what's leading them into that intuition.
And a lot of times we don't even recognize what our intuition is, or people, the biggest question I get with people when they're trying to awaken their intuition is it my mind or is it my guidance?
Mm-hmm.
And because oftentimes our intuition does speak to us through our thoughts. Sometimes, you can imagine, sometimes you are hearing your spirit guides, and I definitely have that experience. And sometimes for me, intuition is just a full body sense of knowing, or it's words or guidance that come into my head. And what I tell people is, first of all, everyone experiences their intuition differently. And so you really have to learn how your intuition speaks to you. Start with what comes naturally. And then as you start to cooperate more and more with this great tool that is your intuition, probably more avenues of multisensory awareness will open up for you as well. But knowing the difference between intuition and thought is, thought's usually louder. It's usually not very kind. It's usually fear-based. It usually has a strong emotional charge. It makes you feel a certain way that's pretty, revved up. Whereas the voice of intuition is neutral, it's calm, it's loving, and it's often surprising. You're like, your mind, creativity doesn't come from the mind. The mind just rehashes what it's been taught, what it already knows. But intuition is coming from, that greater source. So it can be so surprising. Your intuition is those aha moments when you're just like, oh, I couldn't have made that up. Like, it makes perfect sense now that I heard it, but I could not have gotten there with my mind. That's how you know.
I love that. I could not have made that up.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as intuition's always for your highest good.
Yes, absolutely.
You may not like the answer, but it's always in your highest good, that when you get out of your own way, when you let ego go and you really follow intuition, you will see it is for your highest good.
Yeah.
It will keep you out of trouble, not in trouble.
Exactly.
Awesome. So one of the other things you mentioned was clearing channels to hear what's your wisdom.
Yes.
I'm a big chakra girl. I love doing chakra work and clearing that. So let's talk about the difference in clearing your channels, because I don't want people just to think that we're talking those channels of chakras. We're really talking your intuition.
So first of all, the chakras. So those are the major energy centers in your body where your physical body interfaces with your more spiritual being. The chakras each have an intuitive gift associated with them. So as you do chakra clearing work, if that is like the way that you feel called to work, each chakra is associated with an intuitive gift. So the first chakra and the first chakra is usually like more about the earth. So people that could pick up an object and feel the energy of an object. Or one of my favorite things to teach when I have a workshop with a bunch of people is everyone exchanges an object and you hold that object and people will get like amazing reads just off of touching something. So that's often a first chakra kind of gift. Second chakra is where we have like our emotions. So people that are empaths, these are people that feel what other people are feeling like it's happening to them. So it's not cognitive empathy where you imagine yourself in someone else's shoes. When you're an empath, and people listening, you're an empath. People listening, usually because it's just you're one of those people that you're one of those people until you get the hang of it. You feel what other people are feeling. You feel the weight of the world like it's happening to you. That's in your second chakra. And then, oftentimes we talk about like the fifth chakra is people that sorry, I lost my train of thought. The fifth chakra, your throat chakra, is where you might hear your guidance, or you might have like automatic, you might channel or speak your guidance and your wisdom. And the sixth chakra, I missed one, is the third eye chakra is clairvoyance. So you might have images, you might see auras, you might get that information more visually. And then the seventh chakra is just that sense of knowing. And anyone who's had this sense of intuitive knowing knows it because it's so profound. It's like you know something. You don't know how you know it. There may not be words associated with it. It's not a long dialogue, but you know it in your bones and you know it's true. Mm-hmm. And the example for me that I always give is when I was pregnant with my first child with my daughter, I knew she was a girl. I didn't think she was a girl. I had a slight preference for a boy, which is probably why I wanted one of each, but I wanted a boy first because I had this fantasy about having an older brother as a child. But anyway, but I knew she was a girl. And I knew it so much that when the ultrasound technician came, when we did that ultrasound that reveals the sex of your child, I asked, what sex is she? And I didn't even know what I did because I just knew. And so those knowing, that's seventh chakra. So the chakras each have a gift. And as you do that kind of energy clearing work, if that's your jam, you can start to awaken those gifts as well. And you can also sometimes, if the chakras are out of balance, some people are like empaths. Empath is also the fifth chakra. It can be my God, my numbers are off. It can be your heart chakra, the fourth chakra, and the second chakra. So the two places where you feel feelings. And so some people that are like out of control empaths, if you are too much in your heart chakra or too much in your second chakra, you can be like feeling what everyone else is feeling, but not, bringing in enough good stuff for yourself. So that's, sometimes when we're out of balance, I think that's when intuition and these extra sensory gifts become less helpful.
I'm excited that you're talking about empaths too, because I recorded another podcast. The episode is, I just blanked on what the topic was for yesterday. It was freedom. So we talked all about empaths. So if you're listening and you want to learn more about empaths, check out the freedom episode, Freedom from Within. And then back to intuition. Right. So when we're talking about clearing your channels, the next thing I wanted to talk about was awakening your intuition. Right. And I appreciate that you shared the story about when you were pregnant and your ultrasound, because my son's almost 20, and that is completely like birthing him is what just exploded my intuition wide open. Like it was always there, but I didn't know it. It was happening, but I wasn't seeing it. And when I was in the ultrasound, the lady's like, do you want to know? And we're like, yeah. And she says, well, you already know. Well, what do you mean? She's like, because you kept saying he the whole time.
Oh my God, that's so crazy.
Yeah, so listening to you, I'm like, that's exactly where we were. Because I definitely, with him, I really truly believe that he was the portal that really just expanded my intuition. And the things that he has taught me, as you were saying, as a child, we're also intuitive before we're told we can't be. So the things that he taught me when he was young, because I was open enough to see and listen to what he was saying instead of just kind of, pushing it off. So many kids, their imaginary friends, their things that they're telling you, they're talking to you about, That's because nobody's told them not to listen. Like, if
Right.
you have small children, listen to the things that you say, honor who they say their imaginary friends are, because those are their spirit guides. They can still see because nobody told them they can't see them yet.
Exactly. Exactly. And one of the things, I work with a lot of kids in my practice and families. And one of the things that I find so gratifying, especially, just in my 10 years of practice, is how many more families now are open to this stuff and are giving their kids a frame of reference for understanding their own intuition. And
Yeah.
so a lot of kids now aren't shutting it down so much. I mean, I have kids that come in for readings, and I have kids where, we have honest conversations about, what their vibes are telling them, or, how to work on their energetic boundaries if they're empaths. And so I think it's beautiful. And listen to your kids and look at, any fears you have around your own intuition, so that you don't inadvertently stick those on your kiddo, but also recognize, yeah, the little ones especially, they have wisdom, and don't be afraid of it. But definitely tune in and listen, because they have so much to teach you. And, we're moving into a new world where I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of the kids that are coming through right now aren't going to need to shut it down the way we all did.
Yeah, I love that we're talking about kids, because one of the things with Kevin, that's my son's name, um, I was really exploring Reiki, and I got my Reiki. I did the traditional, like, fast for 3 days, have each attunement certain amounts apart. It took me 3 years to get through all of my Reiki masters because of the way I went through it. And one thing I didn't realize is my friend and I had started a Reiki circle, and I would come home, and Kevin was 4, and he was almost in crisis when I came home. And
Wow.
so, because he was so open intuitively, and I wasn't giving him any protection or guidance to teach him, that really affected him. So for me, I spoke with somebody that I knew at the time, and she recommended a crystal that he started wearing, and he's 20 and he still wears it
Oh
regularly.
my God.
That's for protection. And now, my son is, I believe, an empath. Still trying to get him to understand he's an empath, but it's very obvious he is. Um, so, what do you recommend? Do you talk about to kids how to protect themselves, just so they're not so open, like you were mentioning, where it's all flooding in, and how hard that may be for kids? Do you see that happen?
Step one for kiddos is to help them identify it. Because again, a lot of us, I knew I was an out of control empath when I was a kid, and I was picking up everything that everyone around me was feeling and hanging on to all of it for many, many years. And I didn't know. I didn't know it was a thing. I used to think emotions were these kind of things that just showed up out of the blue, and you'd feel a certain way and then they'd float away. And, I don't think other people necessarily have that experience, but if you're an empath, you might go, oh yeah. So I didn't realize, first of all, that I was picking up other people's feelings. And a lot of empaths too, they don't even know what they're feeling. So that first piece is to teach that discernment and teach kids that how to tune in and know, is this mine or is this somebody else's? And just recognize that it's happening. And then the next, this is coming through now, but the next thing to teach them too is to learn what your own energy feels like, because it's different for everybody. And when we can develop that kind of discernment and that sense of what does it feel like to be me? And for a lot of people, it's like a kinesthetic feeling, and empaths are really good feelers. Then you can kind of always have that home base energetically to come back to, and you won't pick up so much stuff. You'll feel it, and then you'll come home and you'll be like, okay, this is me, everything else go. So that can be really helpful as well. And then the very most important thing that I teach all empaths, but especially my kiddos, is this: just because you feel it does not mean you got to heal it. And we could say that with better grammar too, but just because you feel
But
it
I like it.
does not mean you have to heal it. Because a lot of time empaths really do believe, oh, my mom is hurting or my friend is hurting and I can feel it, so that I must need to do something about it. And a lot of times you just don't. Empath just means that you came into earth with a really compassionate and awakened heart. And that's a beautiful thing. And you've earned that probably over many, many, many lifetimes. I believe that we do this this spirit in human form thing more than once, and we just keep
Mm-hmm.
trying until we get enough information and we've done what we needed to do. So a lot of times empaths are older souls that have just develop those big compassionate hearts, and they're just a little more sensitive. And so what they need to learn when they get to that level of empath is the higher level of compassion, which is knowing that it's not your responsibility. You just are, you take care of yourself, and you can have, loving and appreciation for all people and all experiences, but you don't have to take on the pains of other people. It's just not your job.
And I think that learning that to not take on other people's stuff, because I watch it with my son. We were on vacation. Let's hope his girlfriend's mom doesn't listen to this podcast. But his girlfriend and her mom were having some issues. Now we are, on a Caribbean island. She's in North Carolina.
Right.
And he is just beside himself. And it's almost like he's channeling it into us, I'm like, we're all getting along. Why are we suddenly not getting along?
It happens.
I think that was the time that I really realized, oh, he's an empath. And it wasn't because, I'm not really sure how to explain it, but I just watched the switch and I didn't understand why he was suddenly angry with us. Not, angry, but there was definitely this issue. And then like 2 days later, we're sitting and he starts telling me about what's going on. And I'm like, oh. So, that's one of the obstacles, is really to learn as an empath, to learn as somebody who's intuitive, not to wear other people's stuff, to just be able to be in your own skin and your own stuff and hold space for other people and what they're working through.
Beautifully, perfectly said. And, thoughts, emotions are energy. And so when we connect with the energy of ourselves or somebody else and bring that into our space, yes, you will feel it around you. And again, empaths are just more aware of it, but it's happening all the time for everyone. There's a story coming into my brain that Eckhart Tolle shares in some of his teachings. I think it's verbal. I don't know if it's in any of his books, but he talks about working with somebody who came in and was like super negative and kind of dumped all of this stuff and, then found presence and left his office. And then afterwards he went to a cafe and he must've been carrying around this angry energy, right? Because everybody in the cafe started going nuts and a fight broke out and I don't know, it must have been an intuition of the cafe owner looked at Eckhart Tolle and was like, you did this somehow, didn't you? Because he brought that energy with them. And that really does happen. So I would validate that experience. And again, for people like your son, some of us are really here to learn that, I don't want to read your son because again, he has not asked me to do so, although I'm so tempted. But
he's in the kitchen. I can get him.
Oh, he does. I can read him anywhere. No,
I just meant so we could ask him if it was okay.
But I'll read in general so that we won't have to throw that young man under the bus. But what can happen is, if you really care about somebody or you really, you want them to be okay, you sometimes feel like I need to get involved in that and I need to take away pain from other people. And in doing so, energetically, you get involved. And a lot of therapists do that. A lot of people do that. And, it's just his journey or the journey of someone like that is about learning it's okay for other people, just like you said, to have their experiences. And we hold space and we have compassion for people, but we don't have to get involved in their stuff. But it's a learning. And when you're sensitive and loving and kind, it's natural when you feel someone else hurting and you care about them to want to make that hurt go away. And, what we all have to learn is that we are responsible for what goes on within us. And that is actually the best way to impact the world, because when you do your own inner healing and growth work, because we are all connected, you are helping everybody who's ready to join that party and do their own inner growing and work. But as soon as you cross over the line and try to do it for somebody else, you're in the wrong lane.
Right.
And, if you've ever driven a car, it's safer to stay in your very own lane. You get there faster and there are fewer, bang ups.
Well, and I love that you said that, because the thing that I really felt when you were saying that is that I know for me, I'm on a very deep journey and my journey ebbs and flows. And sometimes there's, dry spells where I'm just here. And then there's other times like right now, I'm going through my 10-month intensive yoga training. And it's like, I took it because I wanted to go deeper, because I was going deep and I needed that support to go deeper. I share that in the sense of my husband not on a journey. Like, he's good where he is. He is so supportive of me, but it's very different what I see because I'm on this journey and I've done a lot of healing for me and I've done a lot of shifting for me. And I see that instead of me trying to fix him, tell him what he needs to do, encourage him to do it, my responsibility is to honor that it's not his, but that I can do what I need to do and it will create that shift for us because it's shifted me. So for somebody who's thinking about, I need to help them, I need to do this, it's not that. It's work on you and that will help the shift. So it may just give you a different way to look at it or look at the situation. It may help you be better so that they're able to be better. There's a lots of different things that may actually happen, but that's definitely what I'm experiencing is focusing on me. And I know there's something that happened with us recently that was a total trigger for me. But because I responded completely different, I was like, wow, like, good job, me. I really have been doing the work. Right. And the whole rest of the situation played out completely different than it would have. So that's how we can help the other person without doing their work. By staying in our lane and doing our own work, it will help that relationship.
Yeah, that was so beautifully put. And I think too, if you're in your ego and someone else is in their ego, really neither of you are present. Your egos are just playing like a little bit of like a tap dance with each other. And so when you break the pattern, you are inviting other people also. It's like as if, you're building a block tower together. If you take out your blocks, it's more likely to fall. And you can't do it for that reason because then you're not really truly staying in your own lane, but it often works that way. And I think sometimes too, we want to fix other people because we have this mistaken idea that, safety, security, love, attention, whatever you think that your soul craves is out there. And it's not. Again, we attract all that towards us based on what we already have inside of us. And the more that we can awaken all the gifts that we have within, the more, we'll see that reflected back to us in the outside world. But when we go out there and try to pull it in, that's where we get kind of stuck. And you can't control other people anyway. So it's really fun when you try. But, your locus of control is always within you. It's in, the way you perceive things and your awareness and dealing with your emotions. And so even if, we try to jump in the other person's lane, all we're going to do is get, banged up. It's not, and they might get banged up too. It doesn't really work. But again, the world tells us that, everything's out there. And so it's natural that we want to run out there and try to fix the problem when really what we need to do is awaken the absence of the problem within.
That's some juicy stuff because it is, it is so much when there's so many levels of saying that it's not outside, it's in. It's the growth is in, not outside, creating your feelings, creating your environment, creating like everything comes back to what's in your heart, what's in your soul, not placing your happiness on when I get that job, when I make this money, when when I have the right relationship. We place so much externally when it's really internal because you can only find it inside.
Yeah. And, the more you start to do that work, the more you realize, and it's a process, but the more you or not, because sometimes it's instantaneous. But for me, the more you realize how I feel is not a function of what's going on out there. And, again, there's lots of things in the world that make me happy or vibe with my highest level of happiness or help validate what I'm feeling inside. But there's also lots of times nowadays when I'm sitting around and the external circumstances are not things that my brain thinks that it would like. And yet I'm perfectly calm. I'm perfectly content. I feel amazing. And it's from that space that we really experience human life the way our souls, experience being, if that makes sense. And that's what we're all heading towards. When you talk about awakening, which I think we used that word at the beginning, that's when awakening starts to happen for you, when you start to allow, what's already within you, no matter what's going on outside, to blossom. And it doesn't mean you don't take action on the world. It doesn't even mean that you don't do things that bring you joy in the world. Please do those things. But you start to even know on a deeper level what will bring you joy, because that wisdom within is guiding you rather than your brain telling you, oh, it's a sunny day, and on sunny days I should do X, like I should go to the pool, but maybe I don't feel like going to the pool today, right? Our minds are not nearly as great a guide to what will bring us joy and peace and meaning as our intuition.
So I was in what's just coming to me is I was in a yoga class where we were doing some training, and somebody kept asking, how do you know this? How do you know that? And our yoga instructor just said, well, you just know, you just listen. And so I know that trust is difficult for us in life. So trusting intuition can be way harder. Do you have any exercises or tips that you share with clients that is to teach them how to trust their intuition? I know that when I started with another program that I was working through, she said you start with simple questions by like saying, should I wear the skirt or the pants today? And listen, like by asking little things that weren't going to change your life drastically. We're not like, do you buy the $40,000 car or not? Is my name Chris or is it Janet? Like asking little questions like that. But how do you recommend?
I definitely think it's good to start small, although some of the people listening to this, I'm being told, have had experiences or will have experiences where in your bones you have to do something that's kind of big. And sometimes when you really have those experiences, you follow those too, and that's how you learn that your intuition is working. And, I'm also being called to share one of the best ways that your intuition is working and to start to figure out what your intuition is, believe it or not, is those times when you had an intuition and you didn't listen to it and it turned out to be correct. Because those are the ones that, you have the validation, what it felt like, and it's evidence that it was speaking to you. Most of us, when we get those things, we beat ourselves up and we pretend like we didn't hear it. But when you notice that, when you have those moments when you're like, I should have turned, felt like I wanted to turn left, but I said, no, I'm going to turn right. And there was like this 5-hour traffic jam. Those are the moments that are so golden.
Absolutely. I wasn't even thinking of those, but how many times has that happened in your life? Or, one of my favorite, you mentioned traffic, is I'm lost. So I'm just like, okay, which way do I go? And listen. Yeah. Or you'll be driving along and you suddenly look down at your speedometer, slow down, there's a cop. That's your intuition telling you. So it's such little things that, but I forgot about those moments where you can see, oh, I should have done that and I didn't.
Yeah. And it's perfect validation. Yes. And, I often recommend people start journaling about it. So you start to just notice all the times, anything that you think is your intuition, start paying attention, because it's kind of like when you are trying to buy a new car and you're on the highway and suddenly everywhere you look is the make and model of that car. It's the same thing. Intuition is happening all the time for every single human being. You're all spirits in physical form. You all have intuition. It's different for everybody. Not everyone will necessarily develop it the way that I do or you do, but everybody has it. And when you start to pay attention, you'll notice it everywhere. And once you start to notice it, then you'll start to open up that channel. It'll come through more and more. And you'll start to know, how does my intuition speak to me? And what does my intuition feel like? And, if you chase it, like, I got to have an answer to this, give me an answer. Why can't I get an answer? You just blocked it, because thought and intuition are not friends. But when you start to just notice it and pay attention and treat it with curiosity, it'll unfold. It'll unfold naturally and normally, and you'll start to see it happening for you everywhere. And then, of course, you need to surrender to it. Because again, when we chase, when we force, when we push, we go right into our mind and right out of our inner wisdom. So I always teach that there's a part to intuition, which is surrender. Mm-hmm. And that, your spirit, your soul, however you want to think about it, is going to give you the information that you need and the time that you need it and in the way that you're ready and able to hear it. And when you tune into intuition, you have to allow that. Mm-hmm. Right. When I do a session, if someone would come in and they have a specific question, sometimes I get something totally different. That's because I trust the guides. And even if I didn't trust the guides, it's
You're
good that I do trust the guides.
Right.
Exactly. And so I always say with intuition, it's like, they told us in preschool, you get what you get and you don't get upset, because you have to surrender to it, and you have to just allow that there is a knowing that is much broader and stronger and wiser than your small human mind. And if you can surrender to that, you will get what you need to know, but you probably won't get everything all at once.
Absolutely. One of the points that I want to come back to that you mentioned is you said that everybody can, and that everybody just has to listen. And that's one of the things over the years, because I'm not, in my personal life, I've not always been super open about my intuition. I have those, my little circle of people who know how intuitive I am. And they come to me and they're like, oh, answer this. Let's talk about this. What are you getting? What are you feeling? I have one girlfriend who won't have real conversations with me unless we're face to face, because she knows how to read my face to know when I'm hearing something and when it's just opinion. And so it's kind of fun to talk with her.
I love
she's like,
that.
And she'll be like, what is it? But that's the thing is every single soul on this earth has the ability to connect with intuition. It's a choice. It's free will. If they choose to connect, then it's wide open there for them. They can choose not to believe in it and not to connect, and it's just dormant. But we all have the ability. Nobody has something special. We just have fine-tuned it a little bit more, or maybe a little more open to it, or a little more trusting. Right. But it's definitely something that everybody can develop.
100%. And again, like some of us, we all come to earth with our unique gifts and our unique perspective, and it's going to be different for everyone. So, some of us, intuition may be the thing that you do and you use in your career. And for others, it might just be a normal part of your life. It doesn't matter. We're all different, but everybody has it. Yes. And you said something else that I love too, because I think it's so important to know what's your intuition and what's not. And I remember when I first started doing, this work as a client, as opposed to as an intuitive, and it still persists to this day, I would often have the gift where I could tell when someone was in their intuition and when someone was just telling me their stories and their mind. Mm-hmm. And I use it in my practice for sure now, but I also used it when I was working with healers and helpers, because I could just, I don't know, there was something that I could sense about when they were getting guidance and when they were just telling me what they thought. And it's really important to make that distinction and learn that distinction in you too. For me, it's kinesthetic. So it just feels different. And sometimes if I'm in a session and I'm saying stuff that's sort of like stuff I tell everybody, even though I tell everybody great stuff, and a lot of times a lot of people need to hear the same thing. But if it feels like that, I always tune in. And I just want to go, is this my story that I'm just used to telling people? Or is this really the guidance that's coming through for this person right now? Yeah. Because the thing about intuition that's different than your mind is it's what's true for you in the present moment. There's one moment, it's the one that's happening now, and it's our mind that creates the illusion of time. And when you're in your intuition, you transcend time. It's what's true and happening for you now. And that can change on a dime, but it doesn't matter, because in the next moment, your intuition will give you what's true for you in that moment.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I love about it's ebb and flow. It's always coming and going. And what you say is what's right now can change later. Yeah. It's really connecting to that. It's a neat thing.
Yeah. And learning your tells, like your friend knows your tells. I just love that. It's really, so you should ask her what she's doing, what she's noticing, because that will be great information for you.
Well, she says that I just like my face kind of goes like stiff and blank, right. And she can tell that I'm listening to, like, it's like the mom mode. I'm listening to her, and, because I hear my intuition kind of behind me. And
Got it.
As moms, we have that ability to listen to two things at one time and still be engaged. And she's like, I can tell when you're listening. But it's really fun when we're talking on the phone, because I'm like, okay, this is my opinion. This is not what I've heard. Like I have to clarify so that she doesn't, take it as spirit. She takes it as just her girlfriend telling her what I think.
And that's so good. That's such a good distinction. And I really try to give that information to people as well. And it's so important. And I think that that's actually another good point you made. John Holland, who's a really well-known medium, he talks about like when he's receiving his intuition, I'm doing it right now. Like he doesn't make eye contact. He looks off to the side. And I realize like it's similar when I'm reading sometimes and I'm getting my wisdom. You're kind of like I don't know, I'm doing it right now, kind of looking up and away.
Mm-hmm.
And I was recently doing a Facebook Live. I'm doing a intuition training series in somebody's Facebook group. And she's like, you got to make eye contact. And I was like, yeah, I'll make eye contact when I make eye contact. But a lot of times when you're receiving that intuitive information, you don't make eye contact. So at least
Well,
that's how it is for me.
It's almost like, for me, I'm listening to behind me, like my kids rustling in the cabinet or something.
Right.
And like for you, to me, it sounds like it's like, okay, I'm, looking up to see what I'm being told. It's
Exactly.
that difference of how you hear it and see it.
And it's different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, the biggest lesson. Because I know when I first started doing this and I had teachers, I was like, two things that limited me. One was thinking I had to do it how they did it. So my first group was very visually oriented. Everything was visualize this and visualize that. And I'm not naturally that visual. I had a lot of trouble. I knew things instantly. I feel things in my body kinesthetically, and I hear things. But seeing things was the last last intuitive way that developed for me. And so that didn't work really, really well. So it's always good to start with what comes naturally to you. And then the second thing that I'm still learning is that, we all have our unique gifts to share with the world. You just got to figure out what that is. You don't have to do everything. So sometimes I get hung up in, people come to me and they think, oh, you're an intuitive counselor, so you must know how to do this. And I get what I get, and we all have our unique gifts. And because this world is like infinite and there's so many bodies in it and so many unique and beautiful souls that are all bringing their gifts to earth, you just have to worry about what you do, and you don't have to worry because there's a million other people out there that also have their gifts to share, and there's perfect synchronicity. So we will all do exactly what we're here to do, and the job will get done individually and collectively.
I love that. And I refer back to my yoga teachers a lot just because that's the world I'm in right now. And one of the things that, when you're in practice and you're in a small group and some people are really a lot better than you, they're more flexible than you, their arms are stronger than you, whatever it is, Sheree says, keep your eyes on your own paper.
I love that.
So that you're looking at your own mat and what you're doing and what feels right to you and what works for you and what's your truth. Don't look at somebody else. So when you're talking, that's what I kept hearing is keep your eyes on your own paper.
Yeah.
And do what feels right. Do what feels authentic to you. And that's where I think you find the fun in it.
Yes.
Because it's like where you said, surrender, don't chase, but also have fun with it. Don't chase it. Because as long as you're having fun, then it's able to flow easier. It goes back to that, don't chase it. Just enjoy it because you're that open.
Right. And our natural state is a state of enjoyment. It's a state of play. It's a state of allowing. It's a state of bliss. And so obviously, the more you are in that state, the easier it is to receive your spiritual messages because you are more closely aligned with that vibration of yourself at your highest state. So yes. And also, because why not? Because, we all want to be happy. We all want to experience joy. So I say, get it where you can and do whatever you can to get it that is not harmful. But usually the things that we do are harmful, like drugs or overeating or things like that, aren't really bringing us joy anyway, maybe for like 30 seconds. But most of those things are a mind game.
Yes. Well, I think joy and play is a great way to end our time today.
Yeah.
I am so grateful for you being here today. I just have one more question. I always like to end with a fun question. So my question for you is, if you didn't do what you do, what would you do?
Oh, that's a hard question because I love what I do and I feel so called to do it. But what's coming through is if I didn't do what I do, I would be an artist.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that. I didn't think about that, but that's what I'm being told. I'd be an artist.
Awesome. Well, I know that our followers are going to want to find you, and you mentioned your podcast about mental illness and intuition. So I'm going to add a link to that and the blog post or the show notes. So tell us where people can find you. I know you've got a great website, and then are you hanging out on Facebook, Instagram? Where do you do most of your interacting with people?
So I just launched, my podcast is Intuitive Connection, and we talk about all things intuitive and spirituality. And do you want me to say that again?
You can.
I don't know what that was. So my podcast is Intuitive Connection, and we talk about all things intuition and spirituality. And I also just launched a Facebook group in conjunction with the podcast, Intuitive Connection Community. And so I'm doing a lot of online readings and teachings and meditations, and I'm going to have some really cool challenges coming up. So if that speaks to you, please sign on. And I'm also active on Instagram at Victoria Shaw Intuitive. What else did you ask me? And yeah, and I do, I have an online class for activating your intuition, and I do individual coaching and intuitive counseling sessions in my office in Connecticut and also all over the world. So that's another way to connect with me.
Awesome. Well, I will put all those links in the show notes so people can make sure to follow you. I want to, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Intuition is one of the words that I've really been wanting to talk about. So when you were game for it, I was super excited because that's so much part of the grounding journey for me is I'm being intuitively led to this journey and through all of our journeys. So it's really great to have you here and to talk about such a neat subject with you.
Thank you. It was so great to be here. You have such a beautiful, beautiful light.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening today. I would love for you to join in on the conversation by following me on Facebook or Instagram at Grounding Journey. That's where I get to connect with you and other women like us.